Just 3 weeks ago, my mother was alive. I can still see her in the backyard that morning, kneeling beside her favorite rose bushes with her sun hat tilted sideways, laughing softly as she wiped soil from her hands. The smell of rain lingered in the air, the sky cloudy but calm, and she kept humming that old tune she loved from the 70s, the one she used to play on lazy Sunday afternoons. She looked peaceful, timeless, like the world had finally decided to be kind to her for once. That image, her gentle smile, her voice echoing through the garden, is the one that keeps replaying in my head, again and again, as if my mind refuses to believe it was the last time I ever saw her breathe. The call came at 6:12 in the morning. I was half awake, the smell of coffee barely rising from the kitchen downstairs, when my phone buzzed against the nightstand. The voice on the other end belonged to a nurse, quiet, apologetic, trembling. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed, your mother passed away early this morning. Cardiac arrest, just those words." 4 syllables that ripped through my chest and left nothing but an echo. I remember sitting there, staring at the wall, trying to process what she just said. I asked her to repeat it. She did. And that was it. No more details, no explanation, no warning. Just silence after the storm. The funeral came 3 days later. The rain wouldn't stop. It poured in long silver sheets, washing over the grass and turning the ground into soft, uneven mud. People held umbrellas that bent in the wind. I stood under a black one, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep it from flipping inside out. My mother's coffin looked too small, too final, the polished wood beating with rain as they lowered it slowly into the grave, the sound of the ropes sliding, the dull thud of earth falling. They still ring in my head like a heartbeat I can't forget. But one person was missing, my father. He didn't show up. Not a call, not a text, not a single word of apology or grief. And as the priest read the final prayer, someone beside me whispered what I already feared, that he was in Hawaii. I didn't want to believe it until they showed me. Photos on a phone screen, my father, dressed in a white linen shirt, laughing on a sunny beach, his arm around a woman barely older than me. They were smiling, holding drinks with umbrellas in them, their faces glowing with warmth. The caption read, "Paradise with my love." I stood there at the edge of my mother's grave, rain dripping off my hair and down my collar, staring at the muddy ground that held the only person who ever truly understood me. My father, the man who had once sworn to love her forever, was miles away, living that promise with someone else. That night I couldn't sleep. The rain kept falling, beating against the window in long, rhythmic waves. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through those pictures again, each one slicing deeper than the last. I wanted to scream, to punch a wall, to make it stop, but all I did was sit there frozen. My chest burned like something was caving in from the inside. I kept telling myself it was over now, that I had to accept it, that grief was supposed to hurt this way. I kept repeating that lie until I almost believed it. Then around 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I thought it was another condolence message, but the name on the screen made my blood turn cold. Mom. For a moment, I just stared at it, convinced it was a glitch, an old notification, maybe some data lag from before she passed. But then it buzzed again. A new message popped up, the words glowing through the dim light of the room. "I'm not dead. Come to the grave, now." I froze. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and terror. My hands went numb. I blinked, hoping it would disappear, that I was dreaming or hallucinating. But it didn't vanish. The message sat there, sharp and real and waiting. My mind started spinning, trying to find logic where none existed. Maybe someone hacked her phone. Maybe it was my father, playing some cruel trick. Maybe the number got reused by mistake. But even as I searched for reasons, something deeper, something buried in my gut, told me I couldn't ignore it. The air in my room felt heavy, pressing down on me. I could hear the rain outside growing louder, the wind whistling through the narrow alley beside my house. I don't even remember putting on my jacket or grabbing my keys. One moment I was sitting there staring at my phone, and the next I was behind the wheel, headlights cutting through the mist as I drove toward the cemetery. The city looked different that night, emptier, quieter, like it was holding its breath. The stoplights glowed through the fog, red and lonely, and every turn of the wipers sounded like a heartbeat echoing through my skull. By the time I reached the cemetery gates, my knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. The gates were open, swaying slightly in the wind. I don't know why that felt wrong, maybe because they're always locked after dark. I parked under a dying streetlight that flickered in slow, uneven pulses, grabbed my phone, and stepped out into the cold. The rain had softened into a drizzle, but the fog was thick, curling low around the gravestones like smoke. My footsteps crunched against the wet gravel path. Every sound felt amplified: the drip of water from the trees, the distant hum of traffic, the faint metallic creak of the gate swinging behind me. I moved toward my mother's plot, guided by memory and the weak glow of my phone's flashlight. The beam trembled across the marble names until it stopped on hers. Eleanor Reed, 1962, beloved wife, mother, and teacher. The flowers we'd laid that day were still there, their petals wilted and dark from the rain. I crouched beside the stone, tracing the carved letters with my fingertips, whispering her name like maybe she could still hear me. The air was colder here, almost too still. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure, standing a few feet away just beyond the reach of my light. I straightened slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. The fog swirled, breaking just enough for me to see the outline. Tall, slender, motionless. I couldn't make out the face. Just the faint shimmer of something pale in the darkness. "Mom?" I whispered, my voice cracking in the wet air. No answer. For a long moment, we just stood there. Me and the figure by the grave, while the fog rolled around us like a living thing. My heart was thundering so hard I thought it might give out right there. Then suddenly the figure tilted its head, slow, deliberate, as if it had heard me. "My name is Jackson Reed, 33 years old, an architect living in Portland, Oregon, a city that hides its heartbreak beneath the sound of rain." And that night, I realized something no one had ever told me before. Death doesn't always mean the end. Sometimes it's only the beginning. The figure didn't move at first, just stood there, still as the marble angels behind it, half swallowed by the fog. My breath came in short bursts, clouding the air in front of me. The world had gone quiet, except for the slow drip of rain from the branches above. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn around, to run back to the car, to leave this nightmare behind. But I couldn't move. "Mom?" I said again, my voice smaller this time, trembling. The shape shifted slightly, like it had taken a step forward. I could hear the faint crunch of wet gravel. The beam of my phone's flashlight flickered, dancing over the mist, catching only glimpses: the curve of a shoulder, a hand hanging at its side, the faint outline of a long coat. My throat was dry. I swallowed hard and took a hesitant step closer. The closer I moved, the colder the air became. It felt heavy, pressing down on my chest, like invisible hands squeezing the breath out of me. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Who's there?" I whispered. "This isn't funny." Another step forward, and then the figure spoke. "Jackson." It was barely a whisper, but it was her voice, my mother's voice. I froze where I stood. The sound hit me like a wave, washing every rational thought from my head. My legs moved on their own. I stumbled forward, the flashlight shaking wildly, until the beam finally caught her face, pale, rain-slick, half-hidden beneath her soaked hair. "Mom." Her eyes looked the same, gentle, tired, and filled with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or sorrow too deep for words. I reached out a hand, half expecting it to pass through her like smoke. But before I could touch her, she flinched back. "Don't," she whispered. "You can't touch me, Jackson, not yet." My heart twisted. What's happening? You're gone. I buried you." She looked at me for a long moment, then turned her head toward the grave. The rain shimmered across her skin like it didn't belong there, sliding down and disappearing before it touched the ground. "I didn't die the way they told you," she said quietly. "It wasn't my heart." The words barely made sense. I took another step closer, my shoes sinking into the mud. "What do you mean?" "The doctor said." The doctors were told what to say. Her voice cracked, low and broken, as if every word hurt to speak. "It was all arranged." My chest tightened. "By who?" She turned slowly, eyes lifting toward the shadows beyond the fence line. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, its headlights flashing across the gravestones. And in that split second of light, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Another figure, watching from behind the trees. I barely caught the shape. Tall, broad-shouldered, unmoving, before darkness swallowed it again. "Mom," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. "Who is that?" Her voice trembled. "Don't let him see you here." "He'll kill you like he killed me." The world tilted. My pulse roared in my ears. I spun toward the trees, searching the dark, the fog twisting like a living curtain. When I turned back, she was gone. Just her grave, just the wet earth, just the sound of rain. The light on my phone flickered out completely, plunging me into the dark. I stumbled backward, my boots slipping in the mud, trying to breathe through the suffocating panic clawing up my chest. I could still feel her presence, her scent, her warmth, the echo of her voice. Then a noise, a snap of a branch, close, too close. I turned toward it, heart hammering. And there, just beyond the nearest headstone, I saw movement again. The same figure, watching me. For one endless second, neither of us moved. Then the shadow stepped forward. And this time I saw the glint of something in his hand. A phone, mine. The air in the cemetery felt heavier now, like the fog itself was listening. The shape by the trees hadn't moved since I'd first seen it. My pulse pounded so hard I could feel it behind my eyes. When I blinked, the shadow was still there, solid, silent, watching. I lifted the phone that should have been in my pocket. But the phone in the figure's hand had the same cracked corner, the same faint scratch across the case. My heart stuttered. I checked my jacket again, empty. My phone was gone. I took a cautious step forward. "Hey," I called softly, my voice catching. "That's mine." "Who are you?" No answer, only the low hum of the wind through the trees. Then slowly the figure raised the phone and turned its screen toward me. A flash of blue light illuminated half its face, enough for me to see a mouth. I recognized, though I didn't want to. "Dad?" The word escaped before I could stop it. But when I blinked, the light vanished. The figure lowered the phone and stepped back, melting into the fog until there was nothing left but darkness and the sound of my own breathing. I stood there numb, unsure if I'd imagined the whole thing. My mind raced. Why would my father be here? He was supposed to be in Hawaii. He hadn't even come to the funeral. Yet the outline I'd seen, the posture, the height, it matched him perfectly. I finally forced my legs to move. My shoes slipped on the slick gravel as I hurried back to my car. Every instinct told me to leave. But my mother's words echoed in my head. It wasn't my heart. It was arranged. I sat behind the wheel, rain dripping down the windshield in thin silver threads, and tried to steady my hands. The dashboard clock read 3:27 a.m. I replayed. Everything in my mind, the text, the grave, the figure, the phone, and it all added up to one impossible thought. Someone had my mother's phone and access to her private messages. I needed answers. I drove home through the empty streets, the tires whispering against the wet asphalt. Streetlights slid across the hood of my car like ghosts of passing memories. My house looked smaller than usual when I pulled up, its windows dark, the front porch light flickering from the rain. Inside, I peeled off my soaked jacket and leaned against the door, listening. Nothing. No footsteps from upstairs. No hum of the fridge, just silence thick enough to feel. Then a sound, soft, electronic, from the kitchen. A vibration. I followed it slowly, every muscle tensed. On the counter, beside a half-finished mug of coffee, my laptop screen had turned itself on. A single notification glowed in the corner. New email from Eleanor Reed. My throat closed. I hesitated, staring at her name. Then I moved the cursor and clicked. The message contained only one line. Don't trust him. Check the house phone records. Start with May 12th. I scrolled down, nothing else. No attachments, no signature. Just that date, sitting there like a warning. I whispered the words out loud, tasting them, testing them against the cold air of the kitchen. May 12th, the night she died. For the first time since that phone call from the hospital, I realized something I hadn't dared to think before. My mother might not have sent the message tonight, but whoever did knew exactly how she died, and they wanted me to find out why. The glow from the laptop screen was the only light in the room. I sat there staring at the message until the words blurred together. Don't trust him. Check the house phone records. Start with May 12th. The rain outside had slowed to a whisper. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, each second falling heavy, measured. The house felt wrong, hollow in a way I hadn't noticed before. I opened the browser, my hands trembling slightly, and pulled up the landline records. The account hadn't been touched in months. My mother was one of the few people who still used that phone. She'd always said texting felt too cold. I scrolled through the list. Mostly familiar numbers. The grocery store, her sister in Seattle, my own number a dozen times over. Then I saw it. A call made on May 12th, at 11:46 p.m. less than an hour before she was pronounced dead. The number wasn't saved in her contacts. It began with a local area code, but the last 4 digits looked almost deliberate. Row 117, my birthday, reversed. I copied the number into a search bar, half expecting nothing to come up. But something did. A business listing. Harris Capital Real Estate, Portland office. My father's company. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for me to do something. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake. Maybe she'd called the office for some reason. Maybe she'd wanted to talk to him and didn't have his personal number at hand. But even as I thought it, my gut told me otherwise. She'd known that number by heart. If she called the office that late at night, something was wrong. I opened the details. The call had lasted 1 minute and 52 seconds. Short, panicked, interrupted. I leaned back, running a hand over my face. The message, "Oh, don't trust him," echoed again in my head. If it really wasn't my mother sending these, then someone out there knew exactly what happened. Someone close enough to her to know about that call. The sound of a floorboard creaked above me. I froze. The clock still ticked. The house still breathed. I looked up at the ceiling, Nathan's room. My son's. He should have been asleep hours ago. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step pressing out a groan from the old wood. The hallway was dark except for the faint light spilling from under his door. I knocked softly. "Nathan, you awake, buddy?" No answer, just the hum of his nightlight. I pushed the door open a few inches. He was sitting up in bed, hugging his blanket. "Daddy?" "Hey, what's wrong? Couldn't sleep?" He shook his head. "Someone was downstairs," he whispered. They were talking. My heart skipped. "Talking?" He nodded. "I heard a man's voice." He said your name. I looked around his room, the toys on the shelf, the half-built Lego tower, the quiet glow of the lamp shaped like a rocket. Nothing seemed out of place. But his eyes, wide and frightened, weren't lying. I forced a calm smile. It was probably just the TV or maybe the pipes. Old houses make weird noises, you know. He didn't move. It wasn't the pipes. "Okay," I said gently. "I'll check, all right?" "You just stay here and try to sleep. I'll be right back." I waited until I saw him lie down again, then quietly stepped into the hall and pulled the door shut. The house was still, silent, too silent. I moved through the living room, then into the kitchen. The lights were still off, but I could feel that charged kind of stillness that comes after movement, like the air hadn't settled yet. My coffee mug sat where I left it. The laptop still open, its glow dimmed. Nothing was missing. Then I noticed something else. The back door, just barely open. I went still. The lock had been turned from the inside. I walked toward it slowly, careful not to make a sound. The night air that seeped through the gap was cold, sharp, carrying the faintest scent of smoke. I pushed the door open wider and stepped onto the porch. The rain had stopped completely. The street beyond was empty except for the faint hum of the streetlights. On the porch railing, sitting neatly in the center, was a small envelope, my name written across it in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single photo. It was taken in my father's office. My mother was sitting in a chair, looking up at someone standing behind the desk. Her face was blurred slightly by motion, as if she'd turned just as the picture was taken. But the man behind the desk was clear. It wasn't my father. It was me. The photograph slipped from my hand and fluttered to the floor like a fallen leaf. For a long second, I just stood there, staring down at it, at my own face frozen behind that desk, in a room I hadn't stepped foot in for nearly a year. It didn't make sense. I had never been there with her, never sat across from her in that office. My father's office, but the picture said otherwise. The reflection on the glass shelves behind me, the faint tilt of the desk lamp, it was all real. Not photoshopped, not distorted, real. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message. "Same unknown number. Now you understand, but you're not ready for the truth yet." A chill ran through me. I typed back without thinking, "And who are you? What do you want?" No reply. I picked up the photograph again, turning it over. Something was written on the back in the same looping handwriting that had signed every birthday card I'd ever gotten. "Find the key where the flowers sleep." The backyard garden. My mother's garden. I slipped on a jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the ground was still wet. The soil soft under my boots. The scent of jasmine and damp earth clung to the air. The beam of light cut through the rows of flowers, marigolds, daisies, lavender, all swaying faintly in the breeze. My mother had always said her garden was her peace, a place to bury bad memories. Now I wondered if she'd buried something else. Near the back fence, a cluster of white lilies caught my eye. They were my mother's favorite, and they bloomed even when the rest of the garden wilted. I knelt down and pushed the flashlight closer. Something metallic glinted beneath the petals, a small rusted tin box. My fingers trembled as I dug it out. The lid was stiff but gave way with a creak. Inside was a single silver key and a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges. The note read, "If something happens to me, this key opens what your father kept, hidden at Harris Capital, the truth he built his empire on. Don't trust anyone." The sound of a car engine broke the silence. I turned off the flashlight instantly and crouched lower. Headlights swept across the garden gate. A black SUV rolled to a stop just outside our fence. Through the tinted window, I could barely make out the outline of a man. Tall, square shoulders, wearing a suit. My father's voice carried faintly through the air. Calm, composed, unmistakable. "Jackson, I know you're out there. We need to talk." I froze. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not this late, not unannounced. He took a few steps closer to the gate. The porch light flicked on automatically, and for the first time I saw his face clearly. There was no anger, no grief, just that same unreadable calm he always wore at business meetings. "Son," he said evenly, "you shouldn't have opened that box." My pulse thundered in my ears. "What's in it, Dad?" "What's this key for?" He gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Things your mother never understood. Things that would have destroyed her if she'd kept digging." "She sent me the messages," I said, voice shaking. "From her phone. You knew, didn't you?" "You've been watching me." "Enough," he interrupted quietly, but there was a sharp edge in his tone now. "You're tired. Grief does strange things. Let's go inside, talk like family." He extended a hand, stepping closer to the gate. Then, from somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. My father turned sharply, scanning the darkness. The SUV behind him flashed its headlights twice. A signal. "Go back inside, Jackson," he said, his voice low. "And forget about all this, please, for your own good." He turned, walked back to the car, and within seconds the SUV rolled away, disappearing down the road. I stood there, breath visible in the cold air, the key clenched in my hand. Whatever was hidden at Harris Capital, whatever this was, my mother had died trying to uncover it. And now someone was warning me to stop. But the messages hadn't stopped. As I walked back inside, my phone buzzed again. "You're closer than you think. But next time, don't go alone." The next morning, Portland was draped in fog, thick and heavy like a secret no one wanted to share. I hadn't slept. My thoughts spun in circles. The key, the message, my father's sudden visit. By sunrise, I already knew what I had to do. Harris Capital's main building sat downtown, an old brick structure polished into glass and steel. I'd been there 100 times as a kid. Christmas parties, ribbon cuttings, moments when my father paraded family like part of the company brand. But this time I wasn't there for smiles or speeches. The key was small, silver, and heavy in my pocket. My mother's words kept echoing in my head. "It opens what your father kept hidden." I parked 2 blocks away, tucked the hood of my jacket over my head, and walked toward the building. The lobby lights were off. It was still early. Only the night guard sat at the reception desk, half asleep with the morning paper. I knew the layout. My father's private office was on the 10th floor, and next to it, a storage room that always stayed locked. I slipped through the stairwell entrance and began to climb. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of my footsteps, slow and deliberate. When I reached the 10th floor, everything was silent except for the low hum of air conditioning. My father's office door loomed ahead, frosted glass glowing faintly under the emergency light. I reached for the handle, unlocked. The air inside smelled faintly of cedar and cologne, his signature mix. The blinds were drawn, papers stacked neatly on the desk, his laptop asleep. But what caught my attention wasn't any of that. It was the small wooden cabinet against the wall. It had a keyhole, old-fashioned, ornate. My pulse quickened. I knelt down, slid the key in. It fit perfectly. A soft click echoed in the silence. Inside the cabinet, instead of files or contracts, there was a single black folder and an old camcorder wrapped in a velvet cloth. The folder was labeled simply, "Eleanor, Confidential." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were property documents, bank transfers, and medical reports, all with my mother's name. And then receipts from offshore accounts. The signatures at the bottom weren't hers. They were my father's. The camcorder battery was dead, but an adapter lay next to it. I plugged it into the wall, waited a few seconds, and pressed play. The screen flickered. The video opened to my mother sitting in this very same office. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. My father stood across from her, arms crossed. "Mom, you can't do this, Leonard. You said this project was legal." "Dad, it is legal." "You're overreacting." "Mom, you're laundering through charity funds." "Through the school trust." "Dad, lower your voice." "Mom, I won't. If you don't stop this, I'll—" The screen jolted. The camera shifted, falling sideways. My mother's voice cut off mid-sentence. My father's shadow moved across the frame, reaching for the lens. Then the recording stopped. I stood there frozen, staring at the dark screen, the sound of my own breathing loud in the room. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt before. My phone buzzed again, that same unknown number. "Now you see what she found." But she wasn't the only one who paid for it. Before I could react, the elevator dinged down the hall. Footsteps. I snapped the folder shut, grabbed the camera, and ducked behind the bookshelf. The door opened softly. A figure stepped in, tall, wearing a long coat. Not my father. Someone younger, sharper, the kind of person who didn't belong here at 7 a.m. He walked straight to the cabinet, checked inside, then looked around the room. His voice was low when he spoke, into a small earpiece. "It's gone. Someone's already taken it." I held my breath, every muscle tight. He paused, then turned toward the door. "Tell him Jackson knows." My heart dropped. The man left as quietly as he came, the elevator humming again moments later. I waited a full minute before stepping out. My hands were cold, the key still in my grip. They knew, whoever they were, my father, his partners, maybe more. The camera, the documents, they were my mother's truth. And now they were mine to finish. As I left the office, the first rays of sunlight were breaking through the fog. But in that pale light, something else caught my eye. On my car windshield, a folded note, same handwriting as before. "You have 24 hours, Jackson, or Nathan will be next." The words on the note burned into my mind. "You have 24 hours, or Nathan will be next." My son, my 5-year-old boy. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Everything, the messages, the photo, the key, it all blurred together until only one thought remained. I had to protect him. I drove straight home, the city outside just a smear of gray and headlights. When I burst through the front door, the house was too quiet, too still. "Nathan?" I called out, trying to sound calm. "Buddy, it's me." A small voice answered from the living room. "Daddy?" He was curled up on the couch, blanket wrapped around him. Cartoons still playing softly on the TV. Relief flooded me so hard I almost collapsed. I pulled him close, kissed the top of his head, and whispered, "I've got you. I won't let anything happen to you." But I knew someone was watching. So I called Audrey. "Pack a bag. Take Nathan to your sister's place in Seattle. Don't stop, don't tell anyone, and don't come back until I say." She didn't ask questions. She heard something in my voice. That tone you only hear once you've realized the world you knew is gone. When they left, I sat alone in the kitchen. The folder and camcorder spread out on the table. Everything pointed to one thing. My father's company was built on fraud. Charity money siphoned into real estate. Shell companies, offshore accounts. My mother must have discovered it and confronted him. And that confrontation ended her life. Now they were trying to cover the rest. I looked at the camera again. The recording was incomplete, but enough to destroy everything he'd built. Enough to free her name. I copied the video onto a flash drive and made 3 backups. One for my lawyer, one for the media, one for me. Then I drove back to Harris Capital. It was late evening when I pulled up. The entire building was dark except for one window, the corner office on the top floor, his office. I took the elevator this time. No more hiding. The doors opened with a soft chime. My father was standing at the window, city lights reflecting in his glasses. He didn't turn when he spoke. "I told you to let this go." "I can't," I said quietly. "She didn't deserve what you did to her." He sighed, finally turning to face me. "You think this was easy for me? You think I wanted any of this? Everything I did was to protect this family. By killing her?" My voice cracked on the word. He flinched just slightly. "She wasn't supposed to die." She threatened to expose it all. The investors, the laundering, the foundations. I tried to reason with her. She tripped, hit her head. By the time I called the paramedics— "Stop," I snapped. "Don't lie to me." He took a step closer. His face was calm, but his eyes, they were empty. What you're holding will destroy hundreds of people, Jackson, not just me. Politicians, banks, charities. You'll make enemies you can't imagine. I already have, I said, pulling the flash drive from my pocket. This is going to every outlet in the city tomorrow morning. For the first time, the calm cracked. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. You took everything from her, and you almost took my son. The silence stretched. Then his expression changed, softening, almost sad. You're my son, he said quietly. You're still part of this blood. You can walk away right now. Forget the past. I'll fix everything. I met his gaze. You can't fix death. I dropped the flash drive onto the desk. Goodbye, Dad. He didn't try to stop me. Didn't say another word. Just turned back toward the window as I walked out. The next morning, the headlines exploded across every screen. Harris Capital under federal investigation. Real estate empire collapses amid fraud allegations. And under it all, a smaller line. Whistleblower source unknown. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the rain fall through the garden my mother loved. The flowers were still blooming, swaying gently in the wind. For the first time, the air felt clean. Nathan ran across the lawn, laughing, chasing a butterfly. Audrey watched him from the steps, her hand brushing mine. It was over. Or maybe it wasn't, because as I looked toward the fence, I noticed something nailed to one of the posts. A single white lily, fresh, and tied to its stem, a note. In my mother's handwriting. You did the right thing. But be careful, not all ghosts rest easy. The paper fluttered in the wind, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice in it, soft, steady, and proud. I smiled faintly and whispered, I know, Mom, I know. Then I turned back toward the house, where the morning light finally broke through the clouds.